Imagine waking up in the Middle Ages, in the 1400s. Probably the first thing you would do is look around and try to figure out where you are. Your room would probably look something like this. A little hot water, a bed, and a place to stay would be enough. Your first thought would be to wash your face and eyes. Is there a sink? Unfortunately, there is nothing like that around you. The water you would use to wash your hands and face would probably look like this. You could wash off some dirt, but wiping your face with a cloth would be enough. Then you would have a nice breakfast. Your breakfast would consist of dry, stale bread with a few herbs in it. If you find this, you are lucky, because in most places, breakfast actually consisted of beer and stale bread. At that time, beer had replaced drinking water. The first thing you would do in the morning, of course, would be to clean up after your animals. And as you will soon see, this manure will be of great benefit to you. It's a great blessing for your field. You go to your field and dig up the frozen, hardened soil for a piece of potato, a piece of wheat, or in the summer heat, 8 hours, 9 hours, 12 hours if it's your own land. Do you think you're noble? No, you're not. You're the kind of person we see here. You are a tax-paying, obedient, unquestioning servant. If you're lucky at lunchtime, you'll eat this oatmeal porridge. And if there's a piece of potato in it, you're very lucky. If you're not lucky, this is what you get. Don't even think about it being hygienic or drinkable. The water was so dirty that even the children drank beer for breakfast. Do you know why? It was the only thing that was somewhat healthy. Think of it as a kind of fermentation. The children drank 3 to 4 beers a day. Beer soup actually had a slightly lower alcohol content than today's beer. Even the monasteries used beer instead of water. They would take the beer donated to priests, monasteries, and places of worship along with the barrels and consume it. If you think there was meat you could cook or fry like lamb, that's not how it worked. This was the meat you could eat. There was only fish. If you had the chance to live in a village by a river where fishing was done, that was great. Otherwise, you could eat meat brought by carts from the coast for days on end. The fish we're talking about is the slightly more hygienic, cold-chain broken meat sold at open markets and brought to you in open carts. If you say you can't live without red meat, that was the meat available at the time. By the way, in the Middle Ages, pork was naturally more of a livestock product and was sold under very unhygienic conditions. When I say unhygienic conditions, people would pour their waste into chamber pots and dump them onto the streets. This was the same in the king's castles. If you look at the king's castles, there was an outer wall in those large castles. They used something like a cabinet to relieve themselves there. These toilets flowed outside the palace. The ones flowing into the streets were the king's toilets. I know it sounds disgusting. In the mornings, people called gong farmers would come and collect them. They would take them to the fields and use them as fertilizer. The toilets of the nobles, or the toilets in the streets, were used for agricultural purposes in this way. I know this makes you feel sick, but back then, there was no toilet paper in Europe. Instead of toilet paper, they used cloth wrapped around sticks. Imagine yourself as a slave who had to clean this up. Toilets were typically built collectively in villages or towns. There was no sewage system or drainage system. People would even discuss the day's events there. That was the situation. Toilets in Rome were a bit more refined and luxurious for the nobility, but unfortunately the toilets for ordinary people were not like that. There was no place like a pharmacy where you could get painkillers. Even doctors tried to protect themselves ignorantly. Most were affiliated with the church. In fact, some doctors didn't even know what to do in situations like the plague, which killed 40 million people. In fact, this was the main reason for the collapse of faith in the church.
Most doctors would give you something to drink. You could die from what they gave you to drink. You could lose your life because of the leeches they stuck on you. Some doctors were dentists, some were barbers, and some were blacksmiths. Anyone with tools tried to treat you. If you were lucky, you wouldn't die because of a doctor.
So, do you think it was difficult to die from a mouse bite in your sleep when medicine was so underdeveloped? No. When a mouse came and bit you, you could lose your life days later. 1 in 4 newborn babies did not live to see their first birthday. The vast majority of the remaining babies died before reaching the age of 6. The average life expectancy was already 31, 32. So a person who had reached the age of 30 had already participated in wars, been disabled in some way, or died. Those who idealize this era today do not know the situation the people were in. The people were truly suffering. They fought in wars for feudal lords, often dying without even knowing why. If you were in a good army when you went to war, at least you were in a position to defend yourself within the castle. But when a raiding party attacked your village or came to kill your family, wife, or children left behind, or even did worse things, unfortunately, the outcome was not very pleasant.
Even while relieving yourself in the bushes or forest, you could be struck by an arrow for no reason, just to steal what you were wearing, or your child or spouse could be attacked by a wild animal while gathering wood in the forest. If I haven't convinced you to give up on living in the Middle Ages yet, you'll love the taxes of that era. If you managed to survive, taxes were collected ruthlessly, and the church exploited those who survived. The church was incredibly wealthy. They made millions by selling religion and plots of land in heaven. All they did was create fake taxes and deceive the people. If you opposed what they made people believe in as religion, someone would judge you. These trials were certainly not fair. Bribery was incredibly high. A nobleman could never be in an unjust position against a peasant. Whoever was rich or noble would always buy justice. If you were brought to a major trial, they would certainly look into your situation. If you were too weak to defend yourself, you would be tortured, you would confess to the crime, you could go to prison in someone else's place or even die in someone else's place. Justice would be served to whoever was profitable, whoever was rich. The number of people who walked from within the community to the gallows and died in vain was measured in the millions. If you didn't die, they would lock you up in a dungeon. You would stay there until they forgot your name. You left the pub at night, you left somewhere, someone could come and kill you for fun. They would hit you on the head and take your life.
Tens of thousands of women were thrown into the water on the grounds that they were witches. If they came out of the water, they were believed to be witches. If they drowned and couldn't come out, then it was said that they had no witchcraft powers. They were declared innocent. But the result was the same: death. Did the witch survive? Then she was burned. Thousands of women were eliminated in this way simply on the pretext that they were witches. When armies went to war, the women left behind were balanced in this way. But if you imagine yourself as a king in the Middle Ages, that possibility was very low. Let's say you were a noble knight. Swords and nobility were very rare. Only 3% of the army could be equipped with such armor. Swords were also very expensive, by the way. The common people, instead of such noble armor or horses, think of them as the war chariots or tanks of that era, used spears. These spears were cheaper for the people and represented the army's days-long march. A spearman would march for days. And if you were in a spear-wielding unit, you were likely a peasant. There was a 90% chance that a stone fired from a catapult, the bomb of that era, would kill you instantly. You could lose your life before even entering battle, either from an archer's arrow or a hail of arrows. This is why the Middle Ages was a world far more complex, brutal, and full of contradictions than the knightly tales of fairy tales. And perhaps that is exactly why it continues to fascinate us.